Evening, everybody. How are we doing tonight? If you didn't notice, we live in a crazy, crazy world. Every morning, I get phone calls, or not phone calls, little recorded messages and texts, and more than not, pictures from Israel. They're just checking in with us. It's funny, they asked me, is everything okay in America? And I sort of was like, well, I don't know. Let me get back to you on that. You know, they're wonderfully unified, and I wanted to share a picture with you. They sent me a bunch of these this morning. These have popped up all over Israel, around Gaza. People are just going out and setting up little rest stops for the soldiers, just private people. And they have sodas and cookies and whatever you want. And he says they're all over the place. The soldiers can't hardly go fight the war for the grannies trying to give them cookies. I mean, Israel's just going to be just fine. I mean, I wish our nation would do that for our soldiers, right? Man, that would be incredible. Very rarely do we have wars, knock on wood, on our own soil. So it's a different kind of feel, but they are really taking care of their young boys and women too. They haven't had any women killed. There was another 20-year-old killed today, and so they feel each one of those. But they're doing good work. They're at the heart of it now, they say, right in the middle of Gaza, and hopefully they can get in those tunnels and get out the hostages and frankly free the people from Gaza from these monsters. So, sure.
Fire those rockets, do they come from those tunnels?
They have, yes.
Why can't they know where those are?
So I have that same question. You know, Israel's doing all this bombing, and how do they keep firing rockets? They've slowed them down about half, but all of the money that Hamas was receiving from the European Union, from the UN, from us, they were building there's 300 miles of underground bunkers. It's like World War II. And they have very sophisticated rocket launching. So these things will come out of the ground, fire rockets, and then go back beneath the ground. If Israel sees them in time, they'll hit them. They said some are on timers. So there's not even people there launching these rockets. It's not, on the one hand, it's very sophisticated. On the other hand, it's not. You know, it's rudimentary. They think about a third of the time the rockets don't get where they're supposed to. They hit their own people or go off somewhere in a field. So anyway, I hope they get it. But I wish we were over there to set up a little stand. I've been trying desperately to find a way to help. You guys may have heard I was trying to send bandages, and they said, no, we can't use them. They're not in Hebrew, and our soldiers aren't trained in them. But maybe some of the paramedics could. And so I talked to paramedics, and they said, yeah, we need them. And then, nope, we got them. Then they needed scissors. There's special scissors you cut clothes with. And so I tried to buy those, and nope, somebody came by today and brought them. So the Israelis, they're very competent people. America's used to helping people that won't help themselves, right? That's not Israel. Israel's like, oh, we got it. You need it? I'll go to the store. It's funny. So please keep praying for them, for that whole situation. I think they're going to get it. If we can just keep the North from exploding into another war with Hezbollah, I think they'll be good. But tonight, we're going to go back to the beginning of all of this. Chapter 4 of Genesis. What God was afraid of if we ate from the tree that we're now capable of murder. So beginning chapter 4, verse 1. Now, Adam had, what does your translation say? Yeah. It's the word yada. Old King James is kind of right. It's he knew. Hebrews generally are very polite, very conservative people. They certainly do end up talking about sex and bathrooms and all that, but a lot of times they're doing it in a way they're trying to be polite. And a lot of times in English readers, we can't pick it up. But when they say a man knows a woman, yada, it means that he has had sex with her. What's funny, though, is how some of these words enter into our language. Have you ever heard the word yada? Yada, yada, yada. Yeah. So, yeah, Miss Seinfeld. Now, I can walk you through how that happened, but don't you feel a little stupid now? That's Yiddish, which is an amalgam between Hebrew and German. And so they're still saying that, but they're saying, I know. But it still has that connotation of sex. So anyway, Yiddish is bad always. It's very crude. So Eve, the progenitor of life, becomes pregnant. And this is, of course, a beautiful, miraculous thing. Because even though Adam and Eve have fallen, even though we're going to see in very short order that the risk they're taking is pretty high, God has still given them the ability to be good. They still can fulfill what all of this was about. They can have children. They can be ketov, tov. They can bring forth life. So it's a blessing. But then we get into what is probably the hardest couple of verses in all of Genesis, arguably maybe the whole Old Testament. When she gave birth to Cain, she said, and I need you to look at your translations very carefully here. My New Living is saying, with the Lord's help, I have produced a man. I'm very interested what your translations say. Brought forth a man. Yeah. No, it doesn't say baby. It's very strange. She says, I've brought forth a little ish, a little man. And in Hebrew, they never use it that way. They never say, I had a man. It's very, very strange. I hope after a couple months now, you appreciate, like I do desperately, Moses is very inspired by God. Moses, I think, is a genius in language. Some of the things that he does are just astounding. And here he's doing something that's very, very subtle. So I don't want to overstate this, but we've read through this so often we tend to just flat ignore it. So there is something that's going on. You know, like when you start to watch a movie and the background music changes, and it's not scary music yet, but it's changed. And you're like, what's happening? So we had this beautiful moment where she has had a child, the goodness is continuing, but then what she does. So I was so frustrated with myself trying to translate, to do this right. I broke down and wrote the whole thing out. But the first thing I want you to check is with the Lord's help. Is that in the beginning of your verse or at the end? So how many have the end? How many have at the beginning? Golly, see? And that's completely wrong. It should be at the end. This is the way she said it. I would have felt a lot better if she had put it in the beginning, because that's what a good Hebrew would expect. God goes in the first position. You honor God first with God's help, but she does not do that. I don't know really why, other than Moses is trying to draw our attention to this. Let me just do it in Hebrew. So it's Vatelet et Cain, Vatomar, Kaniti ish et Adonai. So I have acquired. Kana is to take, to have possession. It can sometimes be used for create, like, again, a metalsmith creates, like a blacksmith. But more than not, it's you take something. You have it, it's mine. Very strange. But they're playing off of his name, right? You can sort of see it in Hebrew. You have Kayin and then Kaniti. That's the connection. So that's where the name is coming from. And then at the end, Et Adonai, or, and I probably should have put Et Elohim. That would have been, but you guys know what I'm doing when I put Adonai, right? It's the respectful reference to God as opposed to putting his name. But I shouldn't have done that. Anyway, so she's saying, I have acquired a man, not a baby. Et Adonai, with God. Et Elohim at the end. So again, that's unusual. I got to do grammar here, and this is why it's very subtle. But in Hebrew, you have a grammatical marker that marks between a verb and a direct object. So I belong to your brain for a second. So we don't have it in English. But in order to mark out the direct object, they put et. So hopefully this will help us. So there's two words they can use for with, im and et. But et is used specifically for connecting the verbs with direct object. So like the next screen, if I said in English, I hit the ball. In English, that's fine. We know that following object, or sometimes there's intervening words there, but we can figure out what was hit, the ball, right? Remember, isn't that how your teacher taught you? What's being verbed? What is being hit? Okay. In Hebrew, you always have to say, I hit et, that alerts you what's coming, and then that's the object. So I et the ball. So she is saying, I have acquired et with God. But here's the big distinction. So I dug a hole with the shovel. I dug et a hole with a shovel. What kind of relationship do I have with a shovel? Yeah. Who did the work, the shovel or me? You. The shovel is a tool. And that's what she said. When she used et instead of im, she is saying, yes, there was a partnership, but God was more the tool than the partner. Like if I said, my wife and I baked a cake, that may imply I was a tool too, but it should imply that both of us came together. And certainly her and her husband, she made Cain, I am in Hebrew, with Adam together. But for no apparent reason in the text, suddenly she's moving on to the sense that I have possess a man. And the rabbis have really worried about this for a long time. Why did she say man instead of baby? Is she trying to reflect when God created Adam and said, he is Ish now, and Isha? Is she trying that? And why in the world did she put God at the end and just say et Elohim instead of im Elohim? I made a baby through the help of God. You see what I mean? It's delicate, but there is something there. Again, I don't want to overblow it that she's a nut, but maybe she just went through childbirth and she's struggling, right? But names are important, and this is the first naturally born human. And mom has given this kind of weird possession. Maybe I'm more important than I think I am heritage to Cain. I don't think we ever would have really understood this until what happened afterwards. But Cain didn't just take a hard left turn out of nowhere. There was something to his name. This literally has been debated, argued for 3,000 years by people that speak much better Hebrew than I am. And so I'm just giving you kind of the condensed version. Something happened here that wasn't what we intended. And we should never really believe that we can create at God. We create with God. But as much as we think we're the ones that are producing babies, try that without God. I mean, that's a little bit of what Eve has kind of fallen into. I did this. No, you didn't. And if God doesn't wish you to be good and have a child, you will not be. It is, yeah. And I think it's manifesting itself here in this kind of way. She wants to maybe be like God. Maybe that's what the Ish. Yeah. She has now created, right? And as wonderful and as hard, let's not give the girl no credit. I mean, God has said, this is going to hurt, right? It's going to hurt bad. You're going to learn the value of life. And she is. She knows it. She's very interested in it. And unfortunately, I see a repeat pattern here with Adam. For the second time, he's nowhere to be seen and no help, right? Where was she when he was talking to the snake? And what is he doing in all of this? He's saying, honey, Cain is like the worst name ever for a son. I mean, do you remember all the creation names we went through? I mean, there were a lot of them. Bada being, so there were so many other creation names she could have used instead of Cain. I possess, I acquired. It's just weird. But we see where this is going. Continuing on.
Have the rabbis ever looked at this from the viewpoint that this is an event that took place here, and Moses is writing it so many years later that it's his take on it rather than a direct quote from her?
That's a very good question. And let me say, if you know anything about rabbis or Jews, they never agree on anything. I mean, it's like the joke, they found two Jews stranded on a desert island, and they had 3 synagogues. And they said, well, why? There's only 2 of you, why do you have 3 synagogues? Well, this is the one I go to, that's the one that he goes to, and that's the one we would never go to. So the rabbis very much do have that kind of relationship with each other, arguing. But I would say on balance, they agree that this is Moses' work. Now, they'll argue what inspiration he has from other sources. We're going to get into genealogies very quickly, and you'll see that he seems to bring those over whole cloth. But to me, this has, the whole Kaniti stuff has the hallmark of his work, because he has such a mastery of language. But, yeah. That's a great question. Well, and was the first language really Hebrew? The rabbis say, oh yeah, of course it is. And it's also the language in heaven. So come on, you better get after it. You won't be able to order coffee in heaven, right? I don't think I agree with that. I don't know what the first language was. I know the language that Moses is trying to communicate in, and that's what we're... So how much did she know? It's Moses. I mean, I don't know if the name Cain was there and Moses picks up on the verb. That's possible. Or maybe there was always this whatever Adam and Eve did, Cain is going to make his own choice. And so that's our warning. But always great questions. Are we okay? Oh, question? Means spear? Yeah. One of the kind of connotations, like I said, to this name, to acquire, is also blacksmithing. And in fact, the Arabic word, and I'm not saying Aramaic, but Arabic that the Arabs speak, is similar in some ways to Hebrew. They're both Semitic languages. But their word for blacksmith is Cain. So it's that possession, earthly stuff, earth. So we're not surprised that he's a farmer. We're not surprised about some of the blood and the earth stuff that's coming. It's all wrapped up in there. Such care has been given to these names that this one's shocking. But poor Eve, she went home and Adam said, "Hey, this having babies wasn't so bad. What do you think?" She said, "Get away from me." Later, she gave birth to his brother and named him, we translate it in English as Abel. It's actually Havel. And this is somewhat funny, but also very, very sad. Havel is a vapor, is a mist, is something that it's gone in an instant. So this doesn't bode well for the second son, right? Has anybody ever read Ecclesiastes? Solomon's work. Everything in life is meaningless, right? So the word meaningless is this, Havel. It's all smoke. It's all wisps in the wind. So you've got the first son who is acquire, control, land, power. And you've got the second son who is, a balloon in the wind wherever we go. So it's not looking good. Verse 3. When they grew up, Abel became a shepherd, while Cain cultivated the ground. And so the ground is what word? It's Adam, yeah. So this is playing into it. He is possessing, he is taking. Now, sometimes we Christians like to repeat bad ideas. When I was in seminary, they taught us that Hebrews liked shepherds more than farmers. But you really look at the text from the time, you look at what the rabbis say, and you look who Moses is talking to when he wrote this. Jews, they're never really shepherds, not really. Sure, they have David and they kind of romanticize, but for the most part, they're either slaves in Egypt or they're living in their own land. They're not really ever shepherd people. So they wouldn't instantly have said, oh, well, Abel is good and Cain is bad. They have to do both really to survive at points. So if you run across that stuff, I'd just kind of dismiss it. But interesting, we tend to miss this verse. When it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crop as a gift to Yahweh. Who told him to do this? Nobody. Yeah. This is interesting. This is not the law. This is not, now the people in Moses' time would have understood, oh yeah, that's what you do. At harvest time, you give a tithe, you give back to the Lord. The first fruits, the firstborn, always belong to God. But they haven't been instructed at this point. So Cain is a complicated character. On the one hand, he's got this acquire, possess side to him. On the other hand, he's the first person in the world that's ever really tried to worship God. That's pretty awesome. that was the way they present it here, his idea. So he brings some of his crops. And again, God is continuing the cycle of goodness. He told Adam it's going to be harder, but the earth will still produce life for you. There's still goodness happening. You're still avading, right? You're still bringing life out of the earth. Eve has done it, and now Cain, like his mother, is doing it in a male way. He is farming and he's bringing forth life. So that is a good sign. I think too, when Moses puts the Yahweh part, puts the Lord in it, he's sort of giving a little special smiley face that he's happy with what's going on. But then you guys know, we get to verse 4. Abel also brought a gift, the best portion of the firstborn lambs from his flock. Now, it's like a younger brother to imitate, right? Oh, yeah, I bought you a present too, Mom. Right, because I reminded you her birthday was here. So, yeah.
There's only 4 of them in the whole world.
Yes, although in a couple of minutes, Cain is going to say there's a lot of other people too. So, just like we want a countdown of all the people, this story has only given us 4 up to this point. So, we can talk about when I think there's more. But Abel brings a portion of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord Yahweh accepted Abel's and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. Okay, Bible's full of questions. First, not why, but how does God accept a gift? How do you know he's happy? Most of his readers would have really known. But for us, it's kind of a stretch. There's several passages. Did I put the Leviticus or the Exodus one in there? Leviticus. All right. So this is God accepting a sacrifice from Moses. Fire blazed forth from the Lord's presence and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. The people saw this. They shouted with joy and fell down on the ground. If it burns, if it's consumed by fire, it is God accepting it. If it is not, he does not accept it. Now, we live very different ways from Bronze Age cultures and sacrificial systems and all of that. So it takes a little bit for us to get our brain around it. But if it would not burn, it was considered rejected. And there's lots of reasons Leviticus lays out why it could be rejected. But we have none of that in place. This is just Cain's first idea. His brother is following suit. Which do you think would be easier to burn, the crops that Cain brought or the lamb that Abel brought, Havel brought? Yeah, should have been much, much easier. So I think it was pretty evident. So both. Sometimes, like they're describing there, I mean, it seems to really, fire falls down and he consumes it. The big confrontation, if you remember, on Mount Carmel between Elijah and the prophets of Baal, that's the debate, right? Will God send down fire to accept the offering and then cover it with water and all this stuff, and he still accepts it. But other times, they have coals beneath, and if it catches fire, then they think it's accepted. So, what is wrong with Cain's sacrifice? What's right about Abel's? He did. Right. Yeah. He did, exactly. So, but that's unfair. God, that is so unfair. It was my idea. I planned, and I say this as an older brother with a younger sister, right? I'm the one that remembered it was their anniversary. I'm the one that invited everybody over, and my sister's the one that gets the credit. I mean, God, hello, from the get-go, you are ruining this. But that's not it. What?
The fact that this is, he's accepting the firstborn lamb, going over into the New Testament, the sacrifice of the lamb on the cross.
I think that there's a little of that, but we have to be careful, again, reading the Bible backwards. Because they don't know goats from lambs. They don't know what animal is appropriate, what's not appropriate. They're just bringing what they had. One's a farmer, one's a shepherd. And that would be cruel if God is saying, yep, I'm going to have a lamb thousands of years in the future, and I'm not going to tell you anything about it yet, but I like it better.
But they refer to it as the Lamb of God in the New Testament.
They do. Oh, yeah. And I mean, Jesus is the Passover lamb. He is seen as the lamb in heaven. The sehel, the lamb, is very, very important. But, yeah. Yeah.
Abel gets the best portion. Cain just gets what? What was left over? He said, that's some extra. We'll give it to God.
Well, let's look back at verse 3. I mean, we'll do that very carefully. So Cain presented some of his crops. It doesn't say the best. It doesn't say even the first. But again, he has this idea. Well, yeah, I mean, but it's a thought. I mean, nobody else had this thought. So he gets it, and it's some. It's not the first fruits. It's not all the stuff later on. So he gets it. And then we go to Abel, who brings a gift, the best portion of the firstborn. So significant there. When he gives up a lamb, what is he giving up? The best he had, and that lamb could have grown up and had other lambs. I mean, it's not quite the same. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's, I'm trying to remember. It's crops versus livestock, basically, is what we're talking about. They didn't. But I think they do know the good part, right? They know that's a sign of God. That if something is producing life and it's passing on, that's the process that he's given us, he loves us with. And so they're trying to acknowledge that he's still blessing them with able to bring forth life, whether it's babies or crops or flocks. Yeah.
Because he assumed that God would like this, it was an assumption, he took maybe too much leeway to think about, hey, this is something God would like versus what God's telling him to do. I don't know how to express that in words. Someone with better vocabulary, but
Yeah, but these are great questions because I think this is really where Cain was. Look, I didn't know anything about this. You never said. This was not a command. It's not like you're a verbose God up to this point, right? You just told us not one tree, and so I'm trying. But you picked his over mine. And yeah. Yes, that's a good point. Yes. Yes. There's a great line from my diet program in Deuteronomy that says, fat belongs to the Lord. Yeah.
The blood sacrifice not enter into this anywhere? The blood,
It's going to in a very big way because he's going to shed blood. Yeah.
but I knew the lamb would shed blood, crops would not.
Yeah. And at the end, I think That's even where the rabbis will say that there was a difference in motivation between the two gifts. One was something that I have, and it's a thank you, but it doesn't really infringe on what I have. I mean, it's a safe, it's a safe kind of gift. Whereas Abel was a little bit more of a heartfelt investment. It was a bigger deal. Again, we're so removed from agrarian and semi-nomadic cultures that it's hard to get that. But I think we can. But I don't even think we're to the problem yet. God, as much, and this is important for us to hear, especially as Christians, God is still holy, and he's still true, and he's still righteous, no matter our condition. We sometimes get so wrapped up in God has got to do what I need that we try to force him to change who he fundamentally is to deal with us. And that's dangerous. Now, Jesus will come, he will be incarnate, he will reach all people, but Jesus will not sin in order to save somebody. He will not do it. The Pharisees try to accuse him of stuff, but he rejects that. I mean, the things he's doing are not really sinful. What happens if we can manipulate God into being what we need him to be? Yeah, it's a Canaanite. It's exactly where I think Eve started us on this road. I do things at God. I do things through, he's a tool, God helps me do things. It does not work that way. God, thankfully, is absolute goodness. Thankfully, we don't want him to be otherwise. But we have this tendency to want to, God, just bend for me, just change for me. He loves us. He'll go to the nth degree to try to save us and try to help us. But in a sense, he's not going to corrupt himself. And here you have it with Cain and Abel. I mean, I would have said, just be nice, God. But question, yeah. Sure.
So the first one is, as horrible as it sounds, other than Jesus dying, did he ever do sacrifices to God? And then my second question goes with that. Is this beginning of what we're seeing where other cultures would give sacrifices to their gods, and so that would not be pleasing to Yahweh, our God, because we're doing some sort of weird cultural thing, even though he said if you want to present stuff. So first question, other than Jesus dying on the cross, did he do sacrifices to God?
Did Jesus do sacrifices to God? Or
Other than himself, like
yes.
so he was doing offerings and those types of things.
Yes, regularly, the Passover, all that. So, Jesus is the one probably killing the lamb at the Passover meals because he's the rabbi. He's the head of the family, so to speak. Wouldn't that be an interesting painting? Jesus with the lamb at the Last Supper cutting the lamb's throat. But yes, regularly as a religious Jew, even when he was a little boy, his mom and dad are bringing doves. It says that, and they sacrifice those for him when he was little. So just growing up in that culture, he did it. Your second question is very, very insightful because if we're imagining this is way, way back in the beginning of time, this would be the first process of sacrifice. But Moses' readers in the late Bronze Century would have been very familiar with God's being offered sacrifices. So it's sort of both and. If you look at Cain and Abel, what was God really more focused on in the sacrifice beyond what was given? What was the difference between the two? Yeah, the intention, the heart. And that really, really plays out through the rest of the Bible. To a certain degree, God doesn't really care about, he'll say it, right? I don't care about your sacrifices. I know it's a big deal, and I told you the right way to do it, but I don't care if your heart is rotten. It's got to be this genuine kind of expression. And that is very, very different than, say, the Egyptians. The Egyptians think it's just calculus, right? If I give so many animals to the gods, they have to do what I want. It doesn't matter how I feel about it. Nobody cares how I feel about it. I just do it, and it happens. Where the Hebrew God is very, very different. I want you to have a different heart. I want you to drive for this. I want you to make good choices. And, Canaanite and Egyptian would just laugh. You're crazy. So it's not a big problem here. God is still sticking to what's right. He tells Cain, we'll just say, this made Cain very angry. Does your translation say that? I'm about ready to convince myself to give up New Living because, I'm curious. Verse 5, how many translations say angry? 1, 2. Well, it's not as bad as I thought. Do you have anything else? Long face? Furious? Yeah, that's literally, in the second part, what they're saying. His face turns down, which is how they normally show depression or frustration. But seriously, first year Hebrew, you have hada that can be like despondent, depressed, or it can be angry. And the only way you know are the little suffixes, la. So if it's hada la, he is depressed. He is, I'd say this, like existential crisis. It's a big problem. But hada af is you're angry, you're mad. And it's hada el. So it should not be angry at all. This is more, he's shot to the core. So I don't say this often, but scratch out angry in your Bible and put depressed. This is a big deal. And I think we have the trajectory here. His mom sort of set him up with some maybe weird thinking about how God is the lesser partner in all this. It was his idea, though, to bring it. He gets no credit for that. His brother does get credit, which makes it worse. And he doesn't know where he stands with God now at all. This is really, really hard. So again, we get in English, and he looked dejected, his face fell. So this is where the tree comes into play. I don't think we've had sin. I don't think we've had a problem up until this point. And so God speaks now more than he has ever before with Cain. So our next verse, why are you so, and again, it's hada el, why are you so depressed? Why are you so upset? But he's not screaming, and he's not throwing things. He's not red-faced, any of the stuff they would use for angry. The Lord asked Cain, why do you have such a long face? Why is your face downturned? So what's wrong, Cain? Did you think that you could acquire me? We can't have that kind of relationship, Cain. I appreciate what you've done, but you are not going to burn stuff with no heart in it and then think I'm going to be the silent partner that blesses your action. We have to have the face-to-face understanding here. We have to change where this is going. Can God have hard conversations with you? That's the sign of real maturity, I think, in Christianity, real discipleship, when you're actually being led by God as opposed to leading God. And I hate to say it, if you listen to us a lot of times, we Christians are about telling God what to do. And you know what I'm talking about? Oh, Lord, we know from your word that we're not going to let this happen. Lord, you got it. Lord, okay. I know it's in our DNA. We want to tell him, but sometimes you just got to be like Cain. Calm down. realize you're upset. He's the grown-up. He's the one that we need to be able to connect to. He's not going to be the silent partner in this relationship. But because of the tree of good and evil now, this is what begins to happen. Again, I don't think the problem is, up to this point, it's what's going on inside of Cain. Continuing on, you will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Chata, it's a really good word for us to learn. Sin, chata, first time it's used, is crouching. And it's amazing. It's very animal-like terms. It's like a tiger right outside the door. There's this thing called sin. You don't know about it yet, but it's waiting to pounce on you, to overcome you. It's like this nature inside of you, this animalistic side that's eager to control you. So this is the place where God really wants to work. Cain, I don't care about the sacrifices. I care about this thing living inside of you. When you are disappointed, when God does not live up to your expectations, when things do not go the way you planned, when the world is not functioning the way you thought it should, what will you do? You must subdue it, be its master. This monster, this chata, this sin. And you guys know, I'm sure you've heard it till you're sick of hearing it, but it's an archery term. It goes back to firing an arrow, and if you miss, the Greeks will continue this thousands of years in the future. The Greek word is harmatia, but it's missing the mark. So that's a definition of sin. Here it's much, much further back. It's this same notion that you have not followed the path of God that he intended for you. You fired your arrow and it's wrong. So you need to pick up and do it again. Except for Cain doesn't want to do it again. So what would you do? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed your hand. Question.
Okay, so when God asks, why are you depressed or upset, and he's acknowledging that, why do you look so dejected? Is this very similar to when he asked Adam and Eve, who told you you were naked?
Yes, this is exactly right.
Just the synonym, but with a dude.
Yes. And in fact, in just a few minutes after Cain has killed Abel, they'll go through that same discovery again. Where are you? What are you doing? So this is like a second fall.
This is the first time Cain realizes that there's something off about him.
Right. Yeah. So what do you, oh, yes. Right.
Sowing the field, or what he was thinking, or what he was feeling, or that he thought he was hard and what he was doing. So this is where to me he's like calling him out and saying, hey, if you do right, I'm going to accept your guilt. And he's saying whatever you did that made me reject this is because of what you did.
Right. And it's still not a problem because he can fix it. I mean, God's not banishing him. God's not saying anything at this point other than, look, we have to change the way you think about this. Because I'm not going to be your genie in a bottle. You can't bring me corn and make me make it rain. That's what people are going to try to do. But what do we do when we're humiliated? What do we do when we try something and it falls apart? You know, we were just talking about this in men's Bible study. Peter was so faithful to Jesus the night that someone tried to arrest Jesus. What did Peter do? Cut the guy's ear off. Peter was ready to go to war. But Jesus stops him, says, don't do that, and then heals the guy's ear. And then what does Peter do? He just nosedives, right? His whole world is just falls apart, and he tries to follow. He tries like Cain to do the right thing. He follows the rest party, but he doesn't know what to do. He gets confronted by this little girl, and then before he knows it, he's denying publicly Jesus, which is tantamount to divorce. We'll see divorce in just a few minutes too. When God doesn't live up to our expectations, we have a bad tendency. We start looking for someone to blame, someone to be mad at, someone to kill. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Again, I don't think any of this is a problem yet. Cain's not the bad guy yet. He just has this thing. God's like saying, there's this part of you, right, that you're wrong, so we need to fix it. But there's that side of humans, when someone tells us something's wrong with us, what's the first thing we do? There's nothing wrong with me. Someone else's fault. And where did he learn that? From mom and dad, right? It's her fault, his fault. They were probably still saying it years afterwards. Well, if you hadn't listened to the snake, well, if you had listened to me, it's like, oh, they grew up with that. But that visceral, I'm getting on a soapbox here, but the Palestinians have horrible governments in Hamas and in the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank is just corrupt beyond belief. I mean, money just disappears like you wouldn't believe. And Hamas is just a gang. They're criminals. But they continue to use the hatred of Israel as a means for their existence. There are no good schools. There's no sewer. We don't have running water. But you know what? We hate the Jews. I mean, it's just what Hitler did, right? The whole world is a mess. We lost the war because of the Jews. There's that tendency in us, I don't want to look at what I need to fix. I need somebody to blame. And it's that chata, that this is why we're dangerous now. This is why God is being very careful with us, because it explodes in Cain. He does not seek to subdue the sin in him, the animal. Yeah. Cain did? Yeah, she did. Oh, no, she did. She blamed her husband and she blamed the snake. Yeah. Yeah.
That's our human nature.
It is. I don't think Adam and Eve were all bad, but they weren't all good. I don't think Cain is all bad, despite what happens. I think in this moment, he's very, very human. And this is still shedding blood in our world. But you all know what happens. He doesn't respond to God at all, right? He doesn't say, help me, Lord, or okay, teach me. We just go on. Can we do verse 8? This is fun too. One day, Cain suggested to his brother, and then the text ends. So this is one of the points where we realize we're dealing with a real document here. There are points like, have you ever read the end of the Gospel of Mark? We broke it. What is the end of the Gospel of Mark is not the original ending. It broke somewhere. So we had to kind of put another ending on it. Seriously, look at your end of the Gospel of Mark. You'll see it. Technically, in papyrus interpretations, we call this a lacunae. There is a break in the text. And so it's legitimate to have in there ... We don't know what Cain said. It may have been another writing device where Moses was turning the camera away from what was about to happen because everybody realizes it. But again, look at your Bibles and get your pen out. Let's go out into the fields. Is that in your Bible? So modern biblical interpretation, we take the oldest texts that we have, we compile them. The older, the better. The more recent, the more suspect. So the oldest versions do not have, let us go out into the fields. So if you really want the original, so I'd underline that or circle it or put a question mark about it. It was not originally there. So either a part of this was broken, and somebody just, well, this is probably what it said and wrote it in there. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, it's not changing drastically the story, but I really like that original kind of, this is a real thing. It's not just print off the press like we sometimes imagine it. So either it was left intentionally blank by Moses to give us impending doom, or something was lost, and later writers have put in, let's go out to the field. But while they were there in the field, Cain attacked his brother, Havel, Abel, and killed him, shed his blood. Why? Why did he kill Abel? Jealousy. I was humiliated. I was shown to not be enough before God. I was not seen. I was not appreciated. And that old human drive to blame somebody else, to cover our own shame. Obviously, he can't wage war against God, so he kills Abel. And at this point, he really has crossed a line. I mean, the first human has gotten into this. So let me try to finish this up before we run out of time. Yeah, no, that's a really great point too. These translations, hopefully you guys appreciate with this class now, they matter that we get these words right. There is a big difference in Hebrew between killing and murder, okay? You have to have a soul to be murdered. You can kill. We translated the Ten Commandments to say, thou shalt not kill, but that's wrong. You can kill. You can kill in war, you can kill animals, you can kill all sorts of things. What you cannot do is murder. And that's what this is. This is cold-blooded murder. This is not sanctioned by God. This is not war. This is, I murder you. So, yeah, kill and murder, two different things. Probably should be murder here. So, to go on to 9. Afterwards, again, Yahweh asked Cain, and this is very much like coming to Adam and Eve, where is your brother? Where is Abel? I don't know. Cain responded, am I my brother's guardian? Am I my brother's keeper? Yes. Yes, you are. The things that we try to hide from God, if God knew enough to see the sin crouching inside of Cain, does Cain not think God can't see what's going on inside of him now? Which is a great reminder for your prayer life. God sees exactly what's going on inside, better than you do oftentimes. And so what he's really interested is helping you see what's really going on and dealing with that. God is never so interested in playing games with us where we pretend it was somebody else's fault or this is the issue or all these other blame games. God, let's get to it. So Cain tries to deny it, continuing on. But Yahweh said, what have you done? Listen, Kol, it's again, very much like what he said to Adam. This is the voice. This is so important. Your brother's blood, and it's interesting, it's plural. I don't know why. It's bloods. but it's playing off of this Adam thing. Dom, plural, cries out to me from the ground, Adam. So it's this horrible sort of image that a soul that is contained in the blood has been forced into the dirt. One of the most precious things that God has ever given a soul has been just wasted, just shattered, destroyed. It's eternity being mashed into temporal things. It's ugly. And God is a just God. I mean, when an innocent person is murdered, that bothers God. And it's never not going to bother God. He's never going to just look the other way. That's why he had to send Jesus. He's going to make it right the right way. He's not just going to wink and say, well, it's okay. You were young. Eve can have another baby. There is a high price for forgiveness. So he tells him, you are cursed and banished from the ground, from the Adam, which has swallowed your brother's blood. I think this is getting to the root of what was wrong with Cain all along. He had this idea from, I think, his mother that the land, the life I produce, is mine. I control it. It's mine. I can choose to give you a little bit of it, God, or I can choose not to give it to you, God, but it's mine. A shepherd doesn't have that mindset, right? A shepherd wanders all over the hills and does whatever. It's never really their land. But, I mean, has your family ever fought over land inheritance? And that's fun and sweet, isn't it? It brings the best out of farmers when the kids fight over land, right? Well, that didn't start with your family as much as you may think. It really was all the way back with Cain. So the blessing, if you will, that has caused Cain to start down this road, now again, he's made his own decision, but it's this possession of the land. It's mine. The Adam, I'm Adam, I control it. And God says, no more. You're done. But it's going to have to be a different way. And so God kills Cain, right? No, he doesn't. Look at verse 12, I guess. Yeah. No longer will the ground yield good crops for you, no matter how hard you work. So he's breaking this thinking. You thought the good blessing was continuing because of you, and that I was just going to go along with it. We're not doing this anymore. No matter how hard you put your effort in, you're going to see you're the junior partner in this relationship. There is going to be nothing good that comes out of you unless I do it. You're going to learn, Cain, which is amazing. From now on, you will be a homeless wanderer. Wanderer is the word nod. We'll come back to that in a second. But he's going to be like his brother, right? None of the land you may possess. Continuing on, Cain replied to the Lord, my punishment, Avon, we'll come back to this later, important word, is too great for me to bear. You have banished Garashti, which is divorced. You've thrown me out like a wife. You have banished me from the land, from your presence, and you've made me a wanderer. I think this is the most genuine thing Cain has ever said to God. This heartfelt, I can't do this. I was in a dark, depressed state because of what you did to me, and I made a bad decision. But now I see the horribleness of me, and all you're going to do is take more from me. I need help. And I'm running way over time, but this is what I was talking about earlier. Anyone who finds me will kill me. Who's he talking about? Mom and dad? Yeah, the Hebrews read it. Other people who find him will threaten his life. Yeah. I think there are other people. Again, we're getting the story about humanity and God's relationship. We're not getting a technical manual of when every person was created. This idea didn't originate for me. The rabbis about 3,000 years ago were saying, oh yeah, and there's other people. But you can believe what you want. I mean, he could have maybe feared his family or his children later on, which is interesting. Cain has children. How could that be? And we'll see what happens to them. But anyway, he is worried that there could be other people other than his mom and dad. So would you give Cain the time of day? Oh, it's too hard for you? I saved your life. Your brother is dead. I'm not going to let you have farmland. You're going to be all right. Get out of here. This is an amazing thing that happens here. Cain was honest with God about how hard, how scared. He really was, in that moment, I think, being what we can be at our best. And then you see God do something that no other ancient God ever would. Be merciful, be kind to an unjust person, a murderer. So continuing on, the Lord replied. He first says in Hebrew, la, which is no, so he's negating what Cain said, but then he says lachen, which is like a legal ruling. This is what they say before the judge issues his verdict. So it has kind of the weight of law. Again, implying that he's talking to a lot of people. For I will give a sevenfold punishment to anyone who kills you. Then the Lord put a mark, an ot, on Cain to warn anyone who might try to kill him. So God spares his life and now protects him. Why didn't God do this for Abel? Wouldn't this have been a whole lot better story? If God had said, hey, wait a minute, Cain, you can't kill your brother. I know you're mad, so I'm going to put a safety cone on your baby brother's head so you can't kill him, right? But God doesn't do that. He doesn't just protect the innocent, or maybe in this case, he didn't protect the innocent. Who is God protecting? He's protecting his creation. He's protecting his murderer. It's a deep insight Moses is showing us into who God is. He doesn't just take the perfect people and say, all right, everything's going to be fine, and I got to weed the bad people out. He's trying to warn you up front, hey, we're going to a bad place, stop it. And then when we're in full-on sin and somebody's dead, he says, I'm going to have to take other means to restore you, but I'm not going to let your life end. Because if it ends here. What I can do is continue to try to give you another chance to save you. 2 deaths are not going to make Abel's life better. What Cain is doing is actually atoning for his brother's death, if he can get there. So God actually protects him. Let me say last thing, this ot, and this is a good thing to learn. This is the mark of God. We will see this over and over again. Famously, it comes out of Ezekiel on the Day of Judgment. Do we have the Ezekiel passage? God sends an angel to earth to separate the Cains from the Abels, to separate the people who don't blame others, see how rotten the world has become, and are upset about it. I mean, I feel this so strongly. Our world seems to be divided into 2 camps right now. I mean, don't you feel that? I mean, just really with Israel in the streets, so they're saying the same thing happens at the end times. And God sent this angel. He would walk through the streets of Jerusalem and put an ot, same thing that Cain got, on the forehead of all who weep and sigh because of the detestable sins